Hey everyone, we are in chapter 23, blood vessels. Specifically, we're talking about fetal circulation and how it compares to adult circulation. So this is the third different document that we've gone through here in chapter 23. The first one was on histology. The second document was on circulatory pathways in an adult. This third one here is fetal circulation, the final one in our series for chapter 23. All right, so a little bit of preface here. Why is fetal circulation different from adult circulation? Functionally, the main difference, besides overall developmental things, is that fetal lungs and fetal digestive system, like most other organs, are very immature and non-functional. But lungs and digestive systems are systems and organs that interact with the outside world. The lungs require air to bring in oxygen. The digestive system requires nutrients to absorb and then to filter through whatever it is we eat. So a fetus inside of the uterus of a mother, it is connected, so to speak. There's an intermixing of blood vessels, of maternal blood vessels and fetal blood vessels. So if we zoom in on this part here, so this is not part of the fetus, it's just outside of the fetus. This part that I'm coloring in green, this is the placenta. The placenta is a mixture of fluids and other things, and there are blood vessels here in the placenta. So we're zooming in here in this circle, we're zooming into the placenta, and you can see that there are maternal blood vessels that deliver blood towards the fetus. And then there are fetal blood vessels that take those nutrients to itself, towards the fetus itself. These blood vessels are not connected. There's diffusion that happens across these capillaries. The blood vessels are not connected between maternal and fetal blood vessels, but they're very, very close contact, high surface area capillaries, and you're going to get exchange of nutrients and wastes across these capillaries. The term for these extensions to maximize surface area of the capillaries, these are called chorionic villi. Chorionic villi have the capillaries having these finger-like protrusions or a maximized surface area for exchange of nutrients and waste. The fetus can't get rid of its own waste, so it has to give it back to the mother, and the mother will process the waste. Any nutrients and oxygen that the fetus does take, it'll take in through the umbilical vein. Remember the word vein. Vein is the term for going towards the heart. The umbilical vein is going towards the fetus, the fetal heart. That's why it's the umbilical vein. Carbon dioxide wastes exit the fetus in the umbilical arteries. So to get rid of wastes, those are the umbilical arteries, and there are two of them. Like I said, digestive system is non-functional in a fetus, so which means also the liver is not really functional, it's immature. The liver does a lot of things, including store nutrients and also process toxins. Fetal liver can't do that. So rather than sending a lot of blood to the liver, we minimize how much blood is sent to the liver in the fetus. From the placenta, I'm going to draw this in green. From the placenta, we go through the umbilical vein. This little thing here, that's the belly button, that's the umbilicus. We continue into the fetus, and we could go and branch to the liver. This here is the liver. We could branch to the liver itself, or we can bypass it. Which I'm going to color in pink. This bypass of the liver is called the ductus venosus. It's a duct. It's really a blood vessel, but yeah, it has the word ductus in there. And then venosus is because we're going from one vein to another. We're going from the umbilical vein to the inferior vena cava. We're bypassing the liver, umbilical vein, ductus venosus, and then inferior vena cava to the heart. That's one fetal adaptation. Once we're born, this closes up. We no longer have a ductus venosus. We've talked about the heart and its bypasses. It's worth refreshing our memories on that. We have two bypasses in the heart to bypass the lungs. We don't need pulmonary circulation as much. We're not breathing in air as a fetus. So we want to divert more blood to the rest of the body, to systemic circulation, less to pulmonary circulation. Two ways we can do that. If we're here in the right ventricle, rather than going, right atrium. For here in the right atrium, rather than going to the right ventricle, instead we can go through this hole, the foramen ovale, and end up in the left atrium. Now that we're on the left side of the heart, we can go to the left ventricle and then go to the rest of the body. That's one bypass, the foramen ovale. The other bypass, which I'll draw, I'm going to clear my drawing here. Some blood will end up going from the right atrium to the right ventricle, and then from the right ventricle, we go up the pulmonary trunk. We could go to the pulmonary arteries, or we could bypass from the pulmonary trunk to the aorta. This bypass from the pulmonary trunk to the aorta, this is called the ductus arteriosus. Again, ductus, it's not quite a duct. A duct would mean it's to the surface of a lumen. But it's a blood vessel that connects two arteries. The pulmonary trunk is an artery, and the aorta is an artery, hence ductus arteriosus. Two ways to bypass pulmonary circulation. In all these cases, they're only useful as fetuses. We don't want these passageways once we're born. We need to send more blood to our liver. We need to send blood to our lungs. Within 3 months, foramen ovale closes up completely. I say in most adults because there are certain people who have it slightly open, and those people need surgery. We need to close that up. It's really bad if you have a mixing of left and right, blood in the left and right chambers of the heart. But when it closes up, foramen ovale becomes the fossa ovalis. Foramen means hole, fossa means shallow depression. So it closes and it's thinner in that portion. And you can see that here. There's an increase in atrial pressure, and that increase in pressure shoves that the septa, the interatrial septum closed, functionally closing the foramen ovale, and then it seals itself up. It heals up once you're born. Those ducts, those ductus arteriosus and ductus venosus, they close soon after birth, about 4 to 10 days. Ductus venosus, again, is that passageway from the umbilical vein to the inferior vena cava, which is not labeled. I'll label it. When the ductus venosus, when the ductus venosus closes up, it becomes the ligamentum venosum. It's not actually a ligament, it's just ligament-like. It's a shriveled up blood vessel, no blood's passing through it anymore. Ligamentum venosum. Even, remember, the umbilical vein will still be there. The umbilical vein shrivels up, and becomes the ligamentum teres. It's this extension hanging off of the liver that connects to the inner portion of your umbilicus, to the inner portion of your belly button. When you're born, you cut the umbilical cord, and that'll eventually shrivel up and fall off. But you still have remnants inside of your body. So ductus venosus becomes ligamentum venosum, the umbilical vein becomes ligamentum teres, and then the ductus arteriosus connecting the pulmonary trunk to the aorta, that becomes the ligamentum arteriosum. And again, when you're born, you cut the umbilical cord, so you're cutting the umbilical arteries as well as the umbilical vein on the outside of the body, and that shrivels up, and you remove all of this, all of the placenta when you're born. If we trace the pathway here, let's look at this illustration first. We start here with the umbilical vein from the placenta. So that's step one. That blood from the placenta, let's trace where that came from. Take a look at this diagram up here. If we start here in the mother, the uterus is in the pelvic cavity. So that means from the mother, you had the internal iliac artery leading to maternal capillaries. And those maternal capillaries release oxygen and nutrients to the chorionic villi of the fetus, or just outside of the fetus. Those oxygen and nutrients travel to the umbilical vein, and that's where we are here in step one. Step two, we enter the actual fetus. So I'm just going to label the belly button. What's here labeled here is umbilicus, that's the belly button. We get into the fetus. Blood still continues along the umbilical vein. We could deliver blood to the liver, or we could bypass through the ductus venosus. So I'm going to put that as step two. In our diagram up here, we could go to hepatic circulation of the liver, or we can bypass at the ductus venosus. Either way, we make it to the inferior vena cava. There's step three. From the inferior vena cava, we get to the right atrium, step four. And then here it gets more complicated. We could go the normal route of pulmonary circulation, just like in an adult. We could do that. Some blood does do that. We could go through the foramen ovale. That could be our step five, bypassing pulmonary circulation. Getting to the left side of the heart. Or we could also bypass pulmonary circulation by going to the right ventricle. Let me use a different color. Right ventricle, pulmonary trunk. Instead of going pulmonary arteries, we go to the ductus arteriosus, to the aorta. So that's in our diagram. Let me clear this up. That would be right here. I should use a different color. Call that also five. So here's a five alternate. Either through the foramen ovale or through ductus arteriosus. Regardless, we'll make it to the aorta. and we go down the aorta, or go from the aorta to wherever. We could go to the head, we could go to the arms, we could go to the coronary circulation, all those systemic pathways that we've discussed previously. But let's say we go down to the legs. We go down to the end of the aorta. We hit the common iliacs. We'll call this step 7. And then from here, we again can continue circling throughout the body just as normal, or we can exit the fetus. Step 8, exit through the umbilical arteries. And the umbilical arteries exit out that umbilical cord. Umbilical cord means umbilical vein and 2 umbilical arteries, so 3 blood vessels. So we exit out back to the placenta, back to the chorionic villi, and exchange gases, wastes, and nutrients. Throughout this process, fetal circulation is pretty inefficient. Oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor blood is being mixed. Let me highlight this in yellow. Take a look at the bottom left. As soon as blood that came from the umbilical vein reaches the liver, or really as soon as it reaches the inferior vena cava, it's mixing with oxygen-poor blood. So the quality of blood is not as high as it could be. I'll say that again. As soon as the ductus venosus meets up with inferior vena cava is already carrying oxygen-poor blood from circulating, and now you've got oxygen-rich blood mixing with the oxygen-poor blood at that point. So really, you're just mixing lower quality blood than what we as adults have. Because of that, the fetal blood needs constant circulation, and when you get to physiology, you'll learn about the special hemoglobin that fetuses have to help hold on to oxygen better. I wanted to show another picture that shows similar to what we saw in the very first set of slides, but once we get to these chorionic villi, these little extensions here, that's where we can get exchange. Chorionic villi have those capillaries, provide maximal exchange. Oxygen and nutrients from the mother transported to the fetus, carbon dioxide and waste transported to the mother. The mother is doing double duty. The mother is, providing for themselves as well as for the developing child. Right, let me quickly show where you can see models of a model of the fetal circulation that we have. It's on YouTube. It's within that same videos of the cardiovascular system page, or you can just search on YouTube for my name, fetal circulation. Where are you? There we go. Just want to point out that this mass here, this is representing the placenta. Microscopically, there would be chorionic villi with capillaries. You have the umbilical cord here. The red blood vessel would be the umbilical vein, because it's carrying oxygen-rich blood from the mother. And then there are 2 umbilical arteries which carry deoxygenated blood. Arteries carry blood away from the fetus, away from the fetal heart. And then if we keep going, you can see the liver right here, and then this passageway, this shunt, this bypass, this is the ductus venosus. And then the heart is right here. And there will be a little hole going across. That would be the foramen ovale. I guess I can skip ahead. Here's a left lateral view of the heart, and you can see foramen ovale right here. See that hole? Going from we're looking at the left atrium, we can see into the right atrium. And then ductus venosus is actually up here. This connection. Go back to this view. We point everything out again. Umbilical vein is here. Oh, whoops, that's not ductus venosus. I think I forgot to label ductus arteriosus. So I'm going to do that again. I may have misspoke. Excuse me. This is ductus arteriosus up here. Ductus venosus is what goes through the liver. Foramen ovale goes from right atrium to left atrium. The umbilical cord has the umbilical vein, and you can see the umbilical vein going into the fetus right here towards the liver. And then umbilical arteries are these two right here, 1, 2. So umbilical arteries and the umbilical vein are all inside of the umbilical cord. They lead to and from the placenta. All right, that wraps up chapter 23. A lot to digest here. Let me know if you have any questions. I strongly encourage you to draw these pathways out, make schematics like I did, try to find a nice little, what do you call it? Little pathways on, like blood vessel pathways on people, unlabeled, and label them yourself. And we'll practice more in class, of course. So, all right, let me know if you have any questions. Take care.